The metallic scent of blood mixed with curry spices created an unholy perfume that would haunt Detective Sarah Chun for months afterward. March 15, 2024, 2:47 a.m. in Mississauga, Ontario. The basement of 47 Thornwood Crescent looked like a cultural collision frozen in violence. Michael Thompson's lifeless body sprawled across the concrete floor of what had been his makeshift Canadian bachelor pad. His blood seeping into the cheap area rug positioned between a hockey equipment bag and a small shrine to Guru Nanak. The crime scene told a story of intimate lives intertwined in dangerous proximity. Michael's protein powder containers sat next to glass jars of traditional Indian pickles on basement shelves. A University of Toronto textbook on cross-cultural integration lay open beside a Punjabi English dictionary, both now spattered with crimson droplets. Hockey sticks leaned against walls decorated with both Canadian maple leaf flags and colorful Punjabi tapestries that Nisha had hung to make the basement feel more welcoming. Detective Chun noted the peculiar intimacy of the shared space as she stepped carefully around the evidence markers. This wasn't a random break-in or a stranger's violence. The basement bedroom showed signs of recent occupancy by more than just Michael. A woman's earring glinted under the crime scene lights, wedged between couch cushions. The single bathroom upstairs revealed 3 toothbrushes, multiple hair products, and a domestic arrangement that had clearly blurred every possible boundary. The master bedroom directly above vibrated with each footstep of the forensic team, the thin walls and floor offering no privacy or separation. Every conversation, every intimate moment, every argument would have been audible throughout this cramped townhouse where 3 adults had been living in dangerous proximity for nearly 5 years. The arrangement that would ultimately lead to Michael Thompson's brutal death began with a rejection letter that arrived on a gray October morning in 2019. Sunil Sharma stared at the mortgage denial paperwork, his engineering degree from Punjab Technical University feeling worthless in his trembling hands. Despite 3 years of factory work, overtime shifts, and careful budgeting, Canadian banks saw only an immigrant with insufficient credit history and unstable employment. Nisha found him at their kitchen table, shoulders shaking with the weight of another Canadian dream deferred. The rental market beckoned with its $2,800 monthly payments for modest townhouses in Mississauga's immigrant neighborhoods. Within a week, Sunil had crafted a Craigslist posting that would seal their fate. Indian family seeks respectful roommate, cultural exchange welcome. Furnished basement room available in quiet neighborhood. $800 per month inclusive. Must love children and Indian cooking. He'd added the cultural elements at Nisha's suggestion, hoping to attract someone genuinely interested in learning rather than merely exploiting cheap rent. Michael Thompson's response arrived within hours. Enthusiastic and detailed. A 24-year-old graduate student at University of Toronto, pursuing his master's in social work with a research focus on integration through shared living spaces. His email revealed genuine curiosity about Indian culture, mentioning his thesis on how domestic proximity could break down cultural barriers and create authentic cross-cultural understanding. The interview took place on a Sunday afternoon in November 2019. Michael arrived precisely on time, his tall frame folding awkwardly as he removed his boots at the entrance without being asked. Nisha had prepared samosas and chai, and Michael's genuine delight at the flavors immediately won over 12-year-old Arjun and 8-year-old Priya. He asked thoughtful questions about spice combinations, praised Nisha's cooking technique, and even attempted a few Punjabi phrases he'd learned from YouTube. For Sunil, Michael's $800 monthly contribution meant the difference between keeping their family together and facing eviction. The basement room came furnished with a bed, desk, and small sitting area. Michael would have his own entrance through the basement door, but would share the main floor kitchen, living room, and the single upstairs bathroom with the family. The informal agreement they shook hands on seemed reasonable. Michael would help with household tasks when possible, assist the children with English homework, and participate respectfully in family life without overstepping boundaries. Looking back, Sunil would realize they'd never actually defined what those boundaries were. Red flags appeared immediately, but desperation made the Sharmas ignore them. Michael's enthusiasm bordered on intrusive curiosity. He asked detailed questions about Nisha's daily routine, their marriage traditions, family dynamics in ways that felt more personal than academic. Most dangerously, Sunil's work schedule meant leaving for his 6 a.m. shift while Michael's graduate classes didn't begin until late morning. Every day, Nisha and Michael would share the quiet house for hours, while the children were at school, and Sunil was grinding through another day of manual labor that his engineering degree couldn't spare him from. The foundation for tragedy had been laid with a handshake and the desperate hope that $800 a month would save a struggling immigrant family from financial ruin. The transformation began so gradually that even Nisha didn't notice when Michael Thompson stopped being their helpful roommate and started becoming the center of her emotional universe. By spring 2020, as the world locked down and Sunil's factory shifted to reduced hours, their dangerous proximity intensified into something that would ultimately prove fatal for everyone involved. Michael's thesis provided the perfect justification for what was becoming an unhealthy obsession with the Sharma family dynamics. Deep cultural immersion through shared living spaces required him to document intimate details of immigrant family life. He explained to his academic advisor, justifying the hours he spent interviewing Nisha about her marriage, her dreams, her frustrations with Canadian society. He recorded their conversations on his phone, ostensibly for research, but increasingly because he wanted to preserve the sound of her laughter, the way she pronounced certain English words with a slight accent that he found intoxicating. The helpful roommate persona masked Michael's growing indispensability to the family's daily functioning. When Sunil's work hours increased to cover their reduced income, Michael seamlessly filled the gaps. He drove Arjun to hockey practice and Priya to dance lessons, grocery shopped when Nisha felt overwhelmed by Canadian supermarket choices, assembled the children's furniture when Sunil was too exhausted, and fixed household problems with an energy and patience that made him seem like the husband Sunil was too busy to be. Most critically, Michael was present for every family crisis while Sunil worked through emergencies, family celebrations, and the small daily dramas that define domestic life. His emotional availability created a devastating contrast to Sunil's exhausted absence. When Nisha finally passed her driving test after 3 attempts, Michael celebrated with flowers and her favorite mithai while Sunil simply nodded approvingly before falling asleep on the couch. Michael listened with genuine interest as Nisha described her isolation, her intellectual hunger, her frustration with being reduced from a commerce graduate to a housewife whose only conversations were with children. He remembered details that Sunil's exhaustion caused him to forget, asking about her parents' health, her sister's wedding plans, her dreams of starting a small business once the children were older. The dangerous comfort zone developed through late-night conversations when Sunil worked overtime shifts. Michael would emerge from his basement around 10 p.m., ostensibly for water or a late snack, finding Nisha alone with her thoughts and desperate for adult conversation. They'd sit in the darkened living room, voices low to avoid waking the children, sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears about the future. When Nisha cried about feeling invisible in her own life, Michael's hand would rest gently on her shoulder, offering comfort that felt both innocent and dangerously intimate. The children became unwitting catalysts in their growing closeness. Arjun and Priya naturally gravitated toward Michael's consistent energy and availability, calling him Uncle Michael, with an affection that preceded their formal relationship with their overworked father. Priya's crayon drawings of their family inevitably included Michael's tall figure standing next to mommy and daddy, and when school events required parental attendance that Sunil couldn't provide, Michael stepped in with enthusiasm that made him seem more invested in their lives than their biological father. Nisha's awakening came in gradual waves of recognition about how much she craved intellectual stimulation and emotional attention. Her conversations with Michael revealed an intelligence and personality that had been dormant since immigrating to Canada, reduced to managing household logistics and children's needs. The cultural guilt she felt about enjoying another man's company warred constantly with her desperate need to feel truly seen for the first time in years. Michael's academic interest in her experiences made her feel like a fascinating subject rather than an ignored housewife, and his genuine curiosity about her thoughts and opinions awakened desires she hadn't realized were dying. The shared domestic space created intimacy that felt both natural and forbidden. Cooking together while the children were at school, Michael would stand close enough that she could smell his cologne, complimenting her technique and appearance in ways that made her heart race. They began making household decisions together like a married couple, choosing paint colors, rearranging furniture, creating our space mentality about shared living areas that gradually excluded Sunil from decisions about his own home. Physical attraction built through seemingly innocent interactions. Accidental touches in the narrow kitchen, Michael working out shirtless in the basement while Nisha brought him water, helping each other with cultural elements like explaining hockey jersey significance or assisting with sari draping for community events. The basement became their sanctuary, Michael's private space where they could speak freely without fear of children overhearing or Sunil returning unexpectedly. The first kiss happened during a moment of devastating vulnerability when Nisha was crying about feeling invisible to her husband, and Michael's comfort transformed from consolation to passion with a suddenness that shocked them both. From that moment, their relationship escalated with the intensity of people who had been emotionally starving without realizing it. Their affair schedule took advantage of every gap in the family routine. Morning encounters began after Sunil left for his 6 a.m. shift, afternoon meetings during the children's extracurricular activities, and late-night basement visits when Sunil worked overnight shifts became their pattern. The living arrangement provided perfect cover for their relationship, eliminating the need to meet elsewhere and arouse suspicion, giving them legitimate reasons to be together constantly, making their closeness appear completely normal to children and neighbors who viewed Michael as a helpful family friend rather than a marriage destroyer. By the winter, what had begun as a helpful roommate arrangement had evolved into an emotional and physical affair that would soon demand choices none of them were prepared to make. The first crack in Sunil's willful blindness came on a Tuesday evening in January, when he arrived home from his factory shift to find his family laughing at a joke he didn't understand. Michael and Nisha were finishing each other's sentences in a mixture of English and Punjabi that excluded him completely. Their shared reference to some daytime experience creating an intimacy that made Sunil feel like a stranger in his own living room. When he asked what was so funny, their laughter died abruptly, replaced by an awkward silence that spoke louder than any explanation could have. The changed household dynamics became impossible to ignore once Sunil started noticing them. His children instinctively turned to Michael for help with homework, permission to go places, even comfort when they were upset, treating their father like a visitor who occasionally appeared between work shifts. The household ran with mechanical precision without any input from Sunil, as if Michael and Nisha had become the real parents while he served merely as the financial provider who disrupted their comfortable routine with his presence. When Sunil tried to participate in family decisions about weekend plans or household purchases, he discovered that choices had already been made, discussed during the long hours when he was absent, leaving him to either agree or seem unreasonably controlling. Physical evidence of their intimacy began appearing throughout the shared spaces of his own home. The basement, which had always smelled like Michael's masculine cologne and workout equipment, now carried traces of Nisha's jasmine perfume lingering in the air long after she claimed to have been upstairs all day. Michael's laundry, which Nisha had always done as part of their arrangement, now included items that seemed to require her personal touch. His shirts folded with the same care she gave to Sunil's clothes. His bedsheets changed with suspicious frequency. The grocery shopping revealed new patterns too, specialty items that only Michael and Nisha enjoyed appearing in their shared purchases. Expensive organic foods and foreign wines that suggested a level of coordination and shared taste that excluded Sunil's preferences entirely. The living room furniture had been subtly rearranged to accommodate intimate conversations between two people rather than family gatherings. The couch positioned to face the fireplace where Michael and Nisha could sit close together while the children played. The coffee table moved to create a barrier between their space and Sunil's usual chair. Even the kitchen showed signs of their collaboration. Spice arrangements changed to accommodate Michael's cooking experiments, new appliances appearing that reflected shared decisions Sunil had never been consulted about. Behavioral changes became more obvious as Sunil's suspicions grew sharper. Nisha grew defensive whenever he questioned Michael's presence or role in their family, insisting that their roommate was essential to their household functioning and that Sunil was being unreasonably suspicious of someone who only wanted to help. Michael began avoiding direct conversation with Sunil, communicating through Nisha or the children when possible, disappearing to his basement whenever Sunil tried to engage him in the kind of man-to-man conversations they'd shared during their early months of cohabitation. Most damaging were the children's innocent comments about activities Michael did with mommy during school hours, references to shopping trips, cooking experiments, and long conversations that revealed how much time the two adults were spending alone together. When Sunil's factory hours were reduced and his income increased enough to afford the townhouse without a roommate, Nisha's reaction revealed the true nature of their arrangement. Instead of celebrating their financial independence, she insisted that Michael stay, arguing that the children needed his help, that he'd become part of their family, that it would be cruel to force him to find new housing during his final semester of graduate school. Her desperate advocacy for keeping their roommate despite no longer needing his financial contribution confirmed Sunil's growing suspicions that something far more serious than helpful cohabitation was happening in his own home. The investigation began with lunch break surveillance, Sunil using his factory's flexible break schedule to return home unexpectedly during what should have been empty daytime hours. He parked 3 blocks away and walked through the back alley, using his own keys to enter silently through the basement door that Michael used for his separate entrance. The sounds he heard through the thin walls of his own house confirmed his worst fears. Intimate conversations, shared laughter, and silences that suggested physical closeness no roommate arrangement could justify. Technology provided the final evidence Sunil needed to confirm his wife's betrayal. Their shared Netflix account revealed synchronized viewing patterns during hours when Sunil was at work, romantic movies and series watched together during what Nisha claimed were lonely afternoons. The Wi-Fi history showed Michael's devices and Nisha's phone connecting simultaneously during times when Michael claimed to be at university, creating a digital trail of deception that matched their physical intimacy. Michael's academic calendar, which Sunil obtained by calling the university directly, revealed significant gaps between his claimed class schedule and his actual presence in their home. The basement laundry provided the smoking gun Sunil had been dreading to find. Nisha's favorite gold earrings, a wedding gift from his mother, lay tangled in Michael's bedsheets, along with a hair tie that she'd been searching for all week. Text messages discovered on Nisha's phone during a moment when she left it unattended revealed months of intimate communication, plans for future meetings, and declarations of love that destroyed any possibility of innocent explanation. The final confirmation came during a family dinner when Sunil watched Michael's hand briefly rest on Nisha's lower back as she served food, a gesture so natural and possessive that it revealed the true relationship they'd been hiding. The way she leaned into his touch, the comfort and familiarity of their physical interaction, made it clear that this was not the first time they'd touched with such intimacy. Sunil began planning his confrontation with the methodical precision of someone who knew every corner of his own home, every pattern of his family's routine, and every moment when privacy could be guaranteed. March 15th, 9:30 p.m. Sunil Sharma sat in his Honda Civic 3 blocks from his own home, hands trembling as he gripped the steering wheel. The children were safely at their aunt's house for the weekend sleepover, a detail he'd confirmed twice with Nisha's sister. His factory supervisor believed he was working the overnight shift, a lie that would provide him with 12 hours of unaccounted time. Everything was in place for the confrontation that had been building for months. He used his own key to enter through the basement's separate entrance, the same door Michael used to maintain the illusion of independence while living intimately within Sunil's family. The basement lights were dimmed, creating the romantic atmosphere that made Sunil's stomach clench with betrayal and rage. Soft music played from Michael's stereo system, the kind of contemporary Canadian songs that Nisha had started humming around the house. Another small sign of how completely his roommate had colonized his wife's attention. The sight that greeted him in Michael's private basement space would replay in his mind during every moment of his life imprisonment. Nisha lay curled against Michael's chest on the leather couch Sunil's overtime hours had helped purchase, her traditional salwar kameez replaced by Western clothes that accentuated curves Michael had no right to see. They were watching a romantic movie, sharing wine from glasses that belonged in Sunil's kitchen, creating an intimate domestic scene in space that Sunil paid for but had been systematically excluded from. The territorial violation struck him more powerfully than simple adultery. This wasn't a hotel room or some neutral location where his wife had chosen to betray him. This was his own basement, furnished with his money, heated by utilities he paid for, in the home where his children slept and played. Michael had taken not just his wife but his domestic space, converting the basement into a romantic sanctuary where he could play house with another man's family. Michael's reaction to Sunil's appearance revealed the fatal extent of his entitlement. Instead of shame or apology, Michael stood protectively in front of Nisha and spoke with the authority of someone defending his own territory. "Sunil, you need to calm down and we'll talk about this like adults," he said, his voice carrying the patronizing tone that had always lurked beneath his helpful roommate facade. "This situation is complicated, but nobody needs to get hurt." The cultural rage that exploded in Sunil's chest was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. This Canadian graduate student, this supposed friend who had eaten his food and lived under his protection, was treating him like an intruder in his own home while literally embracing his wife. The casual arrogance, the assumption that Sunil would accept rational discussion about the destruction of his marriage and family, ignited fury that 10 years of Canadian politeness and cultural adaptation couldn't contain. When Michael stepped forward with his hands raised in a gesture meant to be calming, Sunil's vision narrowed to the hockey stick leaning against the basement wall among Michael's sports equipment. The same hockey gear that Arjun had admired, the Canadian symbols that Michael had used to win his children's affection while stealing their mother's heart. The first blow caught Michael across the temple with devastating force, the sound of aluminum meeting skull echoing through the basement like a gunshot. Michael staggered backward, blood immediately streaming down his face, his expression shifting from condescending authority to shocked recognition of mortal danger. Nisha's scream pierced the air, a sound of pure terror that would haunt the neighbor's testimony and Sunil's nightmares for the rest of his life. Michael's desperate attempt to defend himself only fueled Sunil's rage. This man who had systematically dismantled his family was now trying to fight for the life he'd stolen from Sunil's domestic happiness. The second blow caught Michael in the ribs as he tried to dodge, the crack of breaking bones mixing with Nisha's continued screaming. The third blow, delivered with the accumulated fury of months of betrayal and cultural humiliation, struck Michael's skull with enough force to send him crashing into the concrete wall of his own basement sanctuary. Blood spattered across the Punjabi tapestries Nisha had hung to make Michael's space feel welcoming, creating a grotesque mixture of cultural decoration and violent destruction. Michael's body slumped to the floor beside the couch where he'd been holding another man's wife, his blood seeping into the same carpet where Sunil's children had played video games and watched family movies. The basement that had been their secret romantic hideaway transformed into a crime scene that would destroy 3 families forever. The shared domestic space where Michael and Nisha had built their emotional affair became the site where that affair died in violence and blood. The family recreation room turned into a murder scene that would haunt everyone who entered it. Nisha's helplessness in those final moments revealed the complete devastation of their carefully constructed deception. She could only watch as the man she'd grown to love died in the space they'd made their secret world, unable to save him from the husband whose home and family they'd systematically betrayed. When silence finally returned to the basement, broken only by Nisha's sobbing and the drip of blood from Michael's motionless body, the entire house had been contaminated by violence that would never be contained or forgotten. In the stunned silence that followed Michael Thompson's brutal death, Nisha Sharma underwent a transformation that would have impressed the most calculating criminal minds. The woman who had spent 4 years learning to navigate Canadian systems while maintaining traditional Indian values suddenly became a master manipulator, her grief and shock crystallizing into survival instinct that would temporarily fool even experienced homicide detectives. Her first stroke of genius was recognizing how perfectly their roommate arrangement could camouflage the true motive for Michael's murder. Within minutes of his death, while Sunil stood frozen in horror at what he'd done, Nisha was already constructing the narrative that would protect her family from complete destruction. A random home invasion targeting their house because criminals knew about their roommate arrangement made perfect sense, she explained to her shell-shocked husband. Thieves would assume a graduate student had valuable electronics, and the cultural isolation of their immigrant neighborhood meant fewer witnesses and slower police response. The community believability of their cover story was almost flawless. Every neighbor on Thornwood Crescent knew about Michael Thompson, the helpful Canadian boy who lived with the Indian family, drove their children to activities, and carried groceries for Mrs. Sharma when her husband worked long hours. His presence was so established and accepted that a robbery targeting his possessions would surprise no one. Mrs. Kaur next door had often commented on Michael's expensive laptop and tablet, visible through basement windows when he studied late into the night. Nisha methodically staged the theft of Michael's electronics, carefully removing his MacBook, iPad, and expensive camera equipment while leaving less valuable items scattered around to suggest panicked thieves interrupted during their crime. She instructed Sunil to break the basement window from outside, creating the entry point their fictional criminals would have used. Most cleverly, she used their legitimate roommate agreement to explain any mixed possessions or shared financial arrangements that might confuse investigators. Michael's rent payments, shared grocery receipts, and integrated household items all had innocent explanations that supported their story of a helpful tenant killed during a random burglary. When Detective Sarah Chun arrived at the crime scene 3 hours later, she found what appeared to be a straightforward home invasion gone wrong. The Sharma family huddled together in their living room, traumatized immigrants who had lost their helpful roommate to senseless violence. Sunil played the role of devastated household provider who felt guilty for not protecting the young man who had become like family to them. Nisha's limited English worked in their favor, her halting explanations and cultural confusion making detailed questioning difficult while her obvious distress seemed genuine. The investigation complications arising from their complex living arrangement initially supported Nisha's deception. Police struggled to understand the intimate nature of their roommate situation, the way 3 adults had shared domestic space for nearly 5 years. The mixed evidence of shared household items, financial entanglement, and integrated daily routines could all be explained by their legitimate cohabitation arrangement. Community testimony strongly supported their version of events, with neighbors confirming Michael's helpful presence, his regular comings and goings, and his obvious affection for the Sharma children. But technology would ultimately expose the truth that Nisha thought she had buried with Michael's body. The shared household devices that had enabled their affair preserved digital evidence of intimate communication that no roommate arrangement could explain. Wi-Fi logs showed synchronized online activity during hours when Michael claimed to be at university, revealing a pattern of deception that preceded his death. Most damning were the romantic messages exchanged through their shared Netflix account. Love letters hidden in plain sight within a platform both families used. The basement crime scene itself contradicted their burglary narrative once forensic experts examined the evidence more carefully. Blood spatter patterns showed Michael had been standing close to his attacker, not surprised by strangers. The position of his body and the nature of his injuries suggested personal rage rather than robbery gone wrong. Most revealing was the absence of defensive wounds that would indicate Michael fighting back against multiple attackers, and the presence of Nisha's DNA on surfaces throughout the basement that indicated recent intimate contact. Michael's academic research provided the final piece of evidence that destroyed their carefully constructed lie. His laptop, which Nisha thought she had destroyed, was automatically backing up to university cloud servers that preserved his thesis notes detailing inappropriate personal involvement with his immigrant host family. His advisor's records showed Michael had been documenting intimate details of Nisha's marriage, her emotional state, and their developing relationship with academic language that barely disguised his personal obsession. The unraveling came during separate interrogations when Detective Chun exploited the cultural and emotional differences between Sunil and Nisha. Sunil's guilt over the murder made him desperate to confess and accept punishment, while Nisha's survival instinct made her cling to their deception. When presented with the digital evidence of their affair, Sunil broke completely, admitting to the murder while begging police to protect his children from the truth about their parents' crimes. The revelation of the true motive for Michael Thompson's death sent shockwaves through Mississauga's immigrant communities. Roommate arrangements that had been common survival strategies for newcomer families suddenly seemed dangerous and complicated. The Punjabi community struggled to reconcile their support for the Sharma family with horror at the violence that had erupted from their seemingly perfect cultural integration success story. For Arjun and Priya Sharma, now orphaned by their father's imprisonment and their mother's complicity, the safe home space where they had grown up was forever destroyed by the roommate murder that had torn apart everything they understood about family, trust, and the Canadian dream their parents had died trying to achieve. The case became a cautionary tale about the hidden dangers of desperation, cultural isolation, and the complex dynamics that emerge when survival forces strangers to share intimate domestic space without acknowledging the emotional and physical boundaries that such proximity inevitably destroys.